Now, going further in depth into the relationship between Mikasa and Historia with Eren and Ymir requires even more context. I'll start with Freckled Ymir. Chapter 40 focuses on Historia and Ymir. Yes, not even several seconds in, and we already have our first parallel to the founder Ymir. Now, let's read the dialogue. I don't know, maybe because we were alike. I happened to get a chance to live a whole new life. I was reborn as a new person. But when that happened, I didn't hide my old name. Denying that I was born as Ymir would be to admit defeat. Living this way is my way of getting revenge. I'm going to be living proof that your fate isn't decided at birth. So, what about you? You're going to kill yourself. The ultimate act of submission. Is that how much you want to please the people who treated you like a nuisance? If your will is that strong, then shouldn't you be able to change your fate? All of this, all about renouncing fate and destiny. Chapter 121 and Chapter 122. When Eren breaks the chains of paths in order to get to Ymir in order to get the power he needed to save his people. Because through Eren's strong will, he would be able to change Paradise's fate of being destroyed. Chapter 131. Because Eren saw that they never found a way for Paradise to survive, and his visit to Marley was just evidence that the future cannot be changed. Mikasa said the same words he saw in his memories. The Elden Rights group played out exactly in his memories. Sasha's last words were what he saw in his memories. Fate was playing out the same way. However, Chapter 131, Eren says, I just can't accept an end like that. Because despite what Invaderzz wants you to believe, the rumbling was Eren's last resort. Chapter 107. Eren does not want to go along with the 50-year plan. That said, he also does not want to do the rumbling. Chapter 108. Eren waited for Hisaru's response and was disappointed with their answer that the world wanted them to be the scapegoats. Chapter 107. Eren asked Hanji if there was another way. Eren could have easily put matters into his own hands again before this and escaped with the Warhammer Titan. Instead, he waited for Hanji. If there's another way, tell me what it is. Chapter 132. Hanji admits, I'll admit it. I had no solutions, no hope, and no future to show Eren. I was powerless. Chapter 133. Armin says, I'm sorry, Eren. We were the ones who drove you this far. Wow. Tell me again after these two panels why Eren would trust in his friends. They admitted that they were powerless, and so they were unreliable. Chapter 25. Levi tells Eren, whether you trust in your own strength or trust in the choices made by reliable comrades. No one knows what the outcome will be, so as much as you can, choose whatever you'll regret the least. Chapter 133. Eren will not leave Paradise up to fate and chance. By taking responsibility into his own hands and believing in himself instead of his unreliable comrades, he will choose to make the choice he will regret the least. Because leaving it to Armin and the Scouts would have condemned them all to die, just how Eren believing in the Levi squad in Chapter 28 caused them all to die. Chapter 40. If your will is that strong, then shouldn't you be able to change your fate? Now you might say, it was also Eren's fate to kill all those people, and he didn't change that fate. Yeah, because with Eren's choice to prioritize saving his people, prioritize changing his island's fate, Eren made the choice to do the rumbling that killed all those people. Oh, but Invaderzz also said that in his video. Yeah, and he also emphasized on determinism. Where is the agency there? Determinism. Eren never had a choice in the matter to begin with. Back to Chapter 40. If your will is that strong, then shouldn't you be able to change your fate? All this from Ymir, but Historia responds with how she could not do that herself. I can't, even now. Pay attention. This was when she was Krista. Next page. Historia wants them all to go back safely, but figures there's no way. Ymir responds, there is. Ymir explains her plan. A plan so absurd. How are they going to go down when the cliff is so high up? Historia's response is skeptical. So Ymir just shuts her up and does the entire job herself. Chapter 130. Eren does not disclose his plans to his friends that he knew for years. Instead, he only tells his plans to Flock and Historia. He tells them that he would destroy the world and bury the civilization that perpetuated this relentless cycle of hatred deep underground. So how does Historia react to Eren's plan? She was skeptical. She refused initially. But we'll get back to that when we talk about her pregnancy. But remember, she's no longer Krista in this scene. Now you might think that the parallels between Ymir and Eren are a reach, but I'm not done yet. Chapter 40. Ymir tells Historia to live your life with pride. While Ymir is falling off the castle, her internal monologue reveals this. Krista, I'm the same way. I thought it would have been better if I'd never been born. Chapter 65 and Chapter 66. Historia frees Eren from his chains, despite Eren's nihilism, despite him regretting ever being born, despite him wanting to die. Chapter 65, Eren says, I never needed to happen. There it is. Historia immediately connects with Eren and understands him. His statement triggers a flashback on the very next page of her childhood and her mother. What about Historia's mother? Chapter 52, before Historia's mother got her throat slit, she tells Historia, if only you were never born. Those were my mother's last words. Chapter 52, Historia says, they would all be happier if I wasn't alive. Back to chapter 40 again, Ymir says, the world hated me just for existing. To bring happiness to many people, I died. Chapter 68, Eren noticed his own weakness after witnessing the strength of Mikasa, and Eren punches himself in response. He says, I just wanted to beat the hell out of a useless, pathetic brat. That's all. I hope I finished him off. Back to chapter 40 again, Ymir says, but when I did, I wished for something from the bottom of my heart. If I could be born again, I wanted to live my next life for no one but myself. I wished so hard. A lot of the manga, Eren was searching for a way, wishing for a way to get rid of his useless, pathetic self and possess the strength, the power to change things. Chapter 48, Ymir asks Historia, I wanted someone to save me somehow. I'm begging you, Historia. Please save me. Historia responds, I'll fight together with you. No matter what happens, I am on your side. 2 pages later, Historia repeats herself, didn't I just tell you? No matter what happens, I'm on your side. The very next page, who do we see next? Eren is who we see next. But I know what you're gonna say. That's a stretch. Don't worry, I'm not done. Chapter 66, Historia tells Eren, I may be humanity's enemy, but I'm your friend, Eren. When I see someone crying, saying no one needs them, I want to tell them it's not true. Her words here are very important to Eren. And I just wonder how all of this dialogue relates to Eren and Historia's conversation in chapter 130. But again, I'll get to that when I discuss her pregnancy. Chapter 66, Historia remembers Ymir's words from chapter 40. Live your life with pride. This causes her to reject her father's wishes. In chapter 63 alone, there were direct parallels drawn between Historia and Eren of their fathers passing their burden onto their children. So, if anyone tells you Historia and Eren had no parallels, just know that they're full of shit. Chapter 66, this is where she chooses to free Eren from his chains. And this is where Historia saves Eren. Pay attention, those were 2 different things. Chapter 50, Historia tells Ymir, we need to stop living for others. From now on, let's live for ourselves. And just as Historia learns from her friend Ymir to live her life for herself, Eren, through Historia, learns to choose to live his life for himself. Chapter 48 and 66, just as Historia told Ymir that she's on her side, Historia is on Eren's side. I may be humanity's enemy, but I'm your friend, Eren. Eren and Historia are enemies of humanity. You want to wait here until we die because we're enemies of humanity? I wonder how all of this relates to chapter 130. What does Eren do in response to this choice? He chooses to believe in himself. Can you see how many parallels these characters have that are already in the story? No external sources were needed. The source material was enough. No assumptions needed. The parallels drawn were enough. Could you see the relationship between Ymir and Historia? Founder Ymir and Historia. Ymir and Eren and Historia. Mikasa is never mentioned here. You would think that since this takes place after chapter 50 and after you are supposed to assume that Eren fell head over heels over Mikasa in that chapter, that Eren would be whining about Mikasa before he dies. But no, Eren does not whine or cry about Mikasa. Eat me, Historia, and save humanity. Chapter 67, Eren is fully prepared to sacrifice himself to have Rod Rice eat him, but Mikasa, overprotective as always, restricts Eren's freedom to make his own choice. Historia interrupts and gives an alternative, and while doing so tells him, your father was trying to save humanity from the first king because that was the only option he had. This eases Eren's burden of knowing what his father did. Chapter 51, Historia keeps her real name. She laughs and says, Krista? I'm done being Krista. She's gone now. She was a role they gave me in order to keep me alive. Yeah, a girl from a book I read as a child. Now hold on. You're telling me that the name Krista was an alias for the girl in this book? This book looks familiar. What book is this? Chapter 122. Frida and Historia read a book. Has that same picture of a girl and a devil. That girl is the founder Ymir. Wait a second, that image of the devil in the founder Ymir looks awfully familiar to chapter 50 with Ymir and Historia. And since there were plenty of parallels with Ymir and Eren is often referred to as a devil, the devil, and how he basically made a deal with the founder Ymir in chapter 122. Surely this means that Eren and Historia have some deep, relevant narrative connection with one another. And hold on, Krista was an alias of the founder Ymir, meaning Historia took the role of the founder Ymir, just like how her best friend Ymir took the real name of the founder Ymir. That's some good connections. Now, before we talk about the founder Ymir, we need to talk about Freckled Ymir. Chapter 89, Historia's friend was taken from the streets to be set up as a god. They gave her the name Ymir. Ymir says, all I had to do to make everyone delighted and happy was play the role that I had been given. That's what I believed. And that's why I kept playing the part of Ymir. That's like how Historia played the role of Krista until chapter 51. People started calling me the devil instead, but I still kept playing the part of Ymir. The man who had given me a name claimed that I had tricked him. Still, I kept playing the part of Ymir. I thought if that's what would save them, it would be fine. But there are some people in this world who have rocks thrown at them for nothing more than existing. As their symbol, I was stoned from head to toe. Skip forward a bit. Viewer, pay close attention. I opened my eyes again, and spread out before me was freedom. From there, I began to walk, and I lived the way I wanted to. I have no regrets. Chapter 122, we get the founder Ymir's backstory. Her home was burnt, her people were slaughtered, her family was nowhere to be found, her tongue was torn out, and she was enslaved. The imagery of her being bound in chains and led away, a parallel to Ymir in chapter 89. Somebody freed the pigs and all the slaves were going to have an eye gouged, unless someone took the blame. 13 hands point at Ymir, but she still kept playing the part of Ymir. She played the role for the benefit of others. If that's what would save them, it would be fine. King Fritz looks at her, this child in front of him, and shows her no mercy. He has a sick sense of humor. Ironically, Fritz tells her that. You are free. You are free. Remember this. Ymir is chased into the trees, hunted by Fritz's men and their dogs. Her left eye was gouged and she was shot by arrows. Sadistic barbarians that enjoy hunting down and killing a helpless girl who only wants to live. She gets the Titan powers. She now has the strength, the power to change her fate. Founder Ymir had no concept of freedom because it was taken from her at a very young age. As a child to her adulthood, she continued to serve King Fritz because that was all she knew. Let me repeat, King Fritz knew her when she was just a child. She gained her powers when she was just a child. She was subservient even after gaining her powers. And she followed his commands even after she was an adult. If you were paying attention, you would notice that her eyes were never shown in any of the panels. This is important for later, so remember it. King Fritz gives her his seed as a reward. She is forced into bearing his children. Founder Ymir's expressions and pregnancy in these panels alone are a clear parallel to Historia in chapter 107. All of the following panels of Founder Ymir giving birth, she looks miserable in every single one of them. You expect me to believe all of this is supposed to be a parallel to Eren and Mikasa's relationship? Why? Because Stockholm Syndrome? Stockholm Syndrome, where the captor is supposed to show some ounce of mercy in order for the captive to trick themselves. King Fritz showed her no mercy at all. Am I supposed to assume, again, that King Fritz was kind to her off-screen? Are you referring to this page where Fritz congratulates her work? This doesn't explain why Founder Ymir stayed for this long after she gained her powers. Did she keep playing the part of Ymir? Why did she keep playing the part of Ymir? You're telling me she had Stockholm Syndrome before King Fritz showed her the quote-unquote kindness in this scene? Using context, his kindness wasn't even kindness to begin with. This is a sick game with his slave. Just like how Fritz told her she was free before having his men hunt her down and kill her. He congratulated her good work before telling her that she will be forced to bear his children. But don't worry, these panels show that plenty of time has passed. Plenty of time for King Fritz to come to value the founder Ymir and view her, not as a slave, but as his beloved wife, who was responsible for building up his kingdom. One of the subjugated men tries to assassinate King Fritz, and the founder Ymir saves King Fritz despite his brutality towards her. King Fritz, as she was bleeding and dying, tells her, "What are you doing? Rise. I know that no mere spear can kill you. Rise. Work. That is why you were born, Ymir, my slave. That's right. After all this time, after all her suffering, and even after her sacrifice, he still refers to her as a slave. Or am I supposed to assume that this is Japanese culture for a confession scene? Oh, but why would Founder Ymir jump in front of the spear if not because she loved him because of Stockholm Syndrome? If it was Stockholm Syndrome and Ymir loved the king, chapter 139, enough to serve him for 2,000 years because of that strong love, then why did she not regenerate to be with the king she loved so much? Could the other interpretation of why she jumped in front of the spear be because that was her role as a slave? And that this was her ultimate act of submission? Chapter 40, Ymir says, "What about you? You're going to kill yourself, the ultimate act of submission. Is that how much you want to please the people who treated you like a nuisance?" That, and because this was a way she could finally escape her slavery. Founder Ymir loses the will to live, and she chooses to die. She believed that through her death, she could finally be free from King Fritz, but King Fritz has no respect for his slave, and he desecrates her body and forces her children to eat her butchered corpse. Ymir is denied freedom even in death. Fritz tells his daughters, "The blood of Ymir must not perish. If you die, have my grandchildren eat your spines. If my grandchildren die, pass their spines from child to child. Even after I die, my aliens will rule the great lands of this world with their enormity, and my titans shall reign forever and ever. As long as King Fritz's world exists, forever and ever. Until Eren freed Ymir in chapter 122. It ends now," he says. "I'll put an end to this world. Give me your strength." Pay attention to the dialogue here. Chapter 122. "You're no slave. You're no god. You're just a person." Chapter 66. Historia tells Eren, "I can't be a good girl, and I don't want to be a god." Chapter 122. "You don't need to serve anyone. You can be the one to choose. You get to decide. You choose." Chapter 66. Historia, like her friend Ymir before her, chooses to live with pride. Chapter 50. Historia says, "From now on, let's live for ourselves." Just like how Ymir taught Historia to live for herself, Historia taught Eren to live for himself. Chapter 66. And just like how Historia taught Eren to live for himself after she freed him in that cave, Eren teaches the founder Ymir to live for herself when he freed her. Tell me again, on what planet is this scene romantic? Yeah, EreMika shippers keep exposing themselves as people who read Attack on Titan for their ship. Continuing on, there is a very explicit parallel in the titles of 2 chapters alone. Chapter 1, To You, 2,000 years from now. Chapter 122, From You, 2,000 years ago. Were you the one who led me here? You must have been waiting all this time. Waiting 2,000 years just for somebody. And in this moment, where Eren frees Ymir, do we finally get to see her eyes? Do you know why this is so important? Do you know why we see her eyes? Chapter 89, Ymir says, "I opened my eyes again, and spread out before me was freedom." Eren was the one to open the founder Ymir's eyes, and spread out before the founder's eyes was freedom, which Eren gave her in this moment in chapter 122 when he freed her. Chapter 40. If your will is that strong, then shouldn't you be able to change your fate? As the founder Ymir did not have the strong will to change her fate because she was just a child, what better person to free her than the one whose will was so strong he broke the chains of paths in order to change fate? Tell me again, are the parallels between these 4 characters a stretch? This is a stretch. I'll call this the deal with the devil parallel. Are the parallels shown through visual imagery of the devil making a deal with the worst girl in the world not good enough? What visual imagery? Here, Ymir and Historia deal with the devil in chapter 50. Historia and Eren deal with the devil in chapter 130. This parallel is so clear. Just take a look for yourself. Page 9. The panel is positioned to make Historia look like Ymir in the book. You might argue that it's just a coincidence. Isayama just happened to draw the conversation with their backs towards the viewer, and Historia happened to look like Ymir in the book. Except, we had shots with Eren and Historia facing towards the viewer. How this panel was laid out was a choice. Let's read a couple pages later. Zeke and Eren talk about Mikasa's feelings. And then, coincidentally, we go back to Historia, mid-conversation about romantic feelings. Isayama just accidentally composed it this way. Zeke and Eren talk about how Eren will respond to her. And then, coincidentally, we go back to Historia asking a question. Basically, how these pages and conversation was set up, you can view it as if Zeke was asking Eren about how he will respond to Historia's question, even though Zeke was asking Eren about Mikasa. You can definitely see how the EreMika shippers missed this, because they were too focused on the EreMika ship, aren't I right, Enriok? And Historia's question, Historia asked Eren, what if I have a child? There it is. The panel looks like she is making a deal with Eren, the devil of parody. This panel is laid out to look like the deal with the devil from Historia's book. But hey, it's just a coincidence, right? Just Isayama accidentally drawing parallels between Historia and Ymir for years. Eren and founder Ymir deal with the devil in chapter 122. Eren, who had the will but not the strength, gives Ymir the will to change her fate. In exchange, Ymir, who had the strength but not the will, gives Eren the strength to change his fate. It literally goes full circle. I'll repeat this again. Just as Ymir teaches Historia to live for herself, Historia teaches Eren to live for himself. Just as Historia teaches Eren to live for himself, Eren teaches the founder Ymir to live for herself. Eren frees Ymir. Chapter 122, Frida describes the founder Ymir. It's because she's kind and always thinking of others. Krista, which was the name Historia took, was an alias for the founder Ymir. Chapter 51, Historia says, I'm done being Krista. She's gone now. She was a role they gave me in order to keep me alive. A girl from a book I read as a child. Just as how Freckled Ymir played the role of Ymir for the sake of others. When she was given a second chance, she chose to live for herself. She leaves behind the role of Ymir. Just as how Historia played the role of Krista, played the role of the founder Ymir, the girl who was kind and always thinking of other people. When Historia learned to live for herself, she leaves behind the role of Krista. Chapter 54, Historia's conversation with Eren. Everyone was disappointed, right? I'm nothing like the good girl Krista Lenz was. Eren was not disappointed. In fact, there's something I like about you now. You're just normal. Just a normal girl who's absurdly honest. And what does Historia think? Chapter 65. Let's read a bit in order, okay? Eren says, I never needed to happen. Again, Historia remembers her mother. She empathizes because she had that same feeling when she was younger. Historia, eat me and save humanity. And here it is. Eren, that day, the time he called me normal, that made me really happy. Why is this important? 1. To show that Eren and Historia have development in their relationship more than Eren and Mikasa. 2. Eren sees the change between Krista and Historia. Eren does not like Krista. Eren likes Historia. This change occurred because Historia chose to live for herself. So, you can understand why Eren uses Historia's words from chapter 66 on the founder Ymir. Just as how Historia teaches Eren to live for himself, Eren teaches the founder Ymir to live for herself. The founder Ymir leaves behind the role of being kind and always thinking of others. Just as how Freckled Ymir was reborn into a new person, the founder Ymir will be reborn. See, all of this had nothing to do with Mikasa. Nothing to do with her. Mikasa did not free Ymir. Unless you want to tell me when Eren told Ymir, was it you who led me here? You must have been waiting all this time, waiting 2,000 years just for somebody. That somebody was not Eren, but Mikasa. Mikasa was not the one to free Ymir. Eren was the one to free Ymir. Mikasa was not the one to open the founder's eyes to finally see freedom. Eren was the one to open her eyes. The only reason why Mikasa was made relevant to Ymir last second was because Isayama wanted to pander to the Japanese fanbase and their favorite self-insert woman. You know why I know this? Because by forcing Mikasa to be a parallel to Ymir, Isayama forced Eren to be a parallel to King Fritz. Eren was never King Fritz's parallel. He was his juxtaposition. They had radically different ideals. Chapter 122, King Fritz tells founder Ymir, rise, work. That is why you were born. Ymir, my slave. Chapter 71, Eren remembers the words that his beloved mother gave to him. He's already special because he was born into this world. Eren believes through his mother's words that because you were born into this world, you are special. Because you were born into this world, you are free. Chapter 73, Eren says, because from the day we were born, there was something special about all of us. We're free. His mother's words got Eren back up when he was at his lowest. Too bad Isayama butchered bystander with chapter 139. Chapter 122, King Fritz forces his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren to eat their own parents in order to selfishly preserve his Eldian empire forever and ever. The blood of Ymir must not perish. If you die, have my grandchildren eat your spines. If my grandchildren die, pass their spines from child to child. Chapter 107, Eren refuses to sacrifice Historia, refuses the 50-year plan that involved bearing as many children as possible and having children eat their own parents. Chapter 120, Eren refuses to follow Zeke's plan of euthanizing the Eldian people because he could not follow a plan that messed up, because he was born into this world, because Eren valued Invaderzz' children and the future generation. Tell me again how he only cared about his friends. Chapter 107, Eren says, even if it means paying for our lives, with broken walls, trampled land, and children bred and killed like livestock, I will absolutely not accept Zeke Yeager's plan. Eren valued Invaderzz' children and the future generation. Chapter 130, Eren tells Historia, they want you to give birth to a child whose only purpose in life is to become a sacrifice for this island. They want to keep forcing children to eat their parents. I won't let them. Eren valued Invaderzz' children and the future generation. He does not want to burden the future generation. But please, invaders, keep telling us that Eren never cared about Paradis. Eren was not a parallel to King Fritz. Do you know who was though? Zeke, who is presented as Eren's opposite. Chapter 122, the paneling is laid out with purpose, making Zeke take on the appearance of King Fritz. Zeke yells, what are you doing, Ymir? Obey my orders. I'm telling you to take the ability to reproduce from all the subjects of Ymir. Do it now. I am descended from royal blood. Zeke and Eren are opposite characters. Zeke had the opposite ideals of Eren. The whole point of the ideological battle between the two brothers, because they had different conflicting ideals. One is anti-natalist and the other is pro-natalist. Zeke's spiel is that death is freedom, freedom in death. Chapter 114, Zeke's conversation with Levi. You stole the lives of so many of my comrades. I stole nothing. I saved them and the children they would have. I saved them all from this cruel world. Chapter 100, Willie says, I would choose to have never been born if it was up to me. I've hated my blood more than anyone else. The panel shows Zeke. I wished for the extinction of all Eldians. Eren, on the other hand, valued the children born because of his mother's words in Chapter 71. He's already special because he was born into this world. Chapter 73, and that you were free just because you were born into this world. Chapter 100, with his words over Eren, Willie says, but I do not wish to die because I was born into this world. And we all know how Ymir's death wasn't her freedom. So, for Chapter 139 to throw that out the window and turns out death is freedom. Oh guys, see, Eren died, but he's free now, free as a bird, freedom in death. That is a major disservice to Eren's character in opposition to Zeke. But back to Eren and Zeke's natalism debate. Chapter 130, Eren says, they want you to give birth to a child whose only purpose in life is to become a sacrifice for this island. They want to keep children eating their parents. I won't let that happen. Eren values the children and future generation of Paradis. He does not want to burden the future generation of Paradis. He does not want to continue the cycle of children eating their parents. Now, you might argue that Eren and Mikasa's relationship is a parallel to Ymir and King Fritz, despite what I just said about Eren, Zeke, and King Fritz. Okay. Could this parallel be because Mikasa was almost enslaved in Chapter 6 by human traffickers, like how Ymir was enslaved by King Fritz? Except, Mikasa was saved from slavery by Eren, and Ymir was enslaved by King Fritz. That is not a parallel. Could this parallel be because of Mikasa's Ackerman powers being a slave to their host? Like how Ymir was a slave to her host King Fritz? Even though Chapter 130 confirms that the Ackerman slave aspect was a lie? Could this be because of Mikasa's one-sided love towards Eren, like Ymir's one-sided love towards her abuser? Even though ending defenders swear up and down that Eren had a mutual romantic attraction to Mikasa, so it wasn't one-sided. King Fritz never loved Ymir even as she was dying or after she died. Still a parallel, even though Eren was never this abusive towards Mikasa. Hello? See how Mikasa was irrelevant this whole time? Mikasa did not free Ymir. Eren was the one to free Ymir. Mikasa is not the parallel to Ymir. Historia is a parallel to Ymir. Freckled Ymir is also a parallel to Ymir.